Welcome to the next edition of Grid Forward Chats. I'm Bryce Yonker. Today we have with us Dr. Stephen Ashby. Dr. Ashby is the director of PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, one of the 17 labs with DOE. Thanks for being on, Steve.
My pleasure, Bryce. Thank you so much for the invitation.
I know you've been at that lab, at another lab for some period of time. Maybe you can give us a bit of background on yourself and what brought you to this current role.
Sure. I'm a computational mathematician by training, which means I like to solve hard, challenging problems on big supercomputers, and that's what I did early in my career. I got my PhD in computer science from the University of Illinois, and I went right to Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and began my career there, working on a variety of projects ranging from groundwater modeling to nuclear weapons work. Very interesting career. But then in 2008, I had the opportunity to join PNNL as its Deputy Director for Science and Technology. And then in 2015, just 10 years ago, I became the director of this laboratory, and I'm enjoying that role since.
Well, thank you for a decade at the helm there. I know Pacific Northwest National Labs covers a wide range of research and applied science areas. Of course, energy in the basic science arena, data science, as you had mentioned. There's some national security work. Can you speak to the various areas that PNNL is working in? And I know we'll get further on the grid areas today, but maybe you can give us the broader perspective.
Sure. PNNL is one of the 10 DOE labs stewarded by the DOE Office of Science. We're also a multi-program lab and one of the larger labs in the family of 17. We do have a pretty broad portfolio of activities, ranging from work that we do in scientific discovery to energy resilience and national security. We draw on some signature strengths in chemistry, earth sciences, biology, and data science to really advance scientific discovery, because we're a curious species as humans. We want to enable energy resiliency to make it affordable and reliable for Americans, and of course, enhancing national security. And there's intersections, as we'll explore perhaps over this interview, where all three come together to advance the grid. Each of these areas is contributing to our nation's energy goals, and we're really excited about what we can do to realize the Secretary's challenge to boldly unleash American energy dominance to meet our growing energy needs. What we can do to advance fundamental science in key areas, including AI and quantum computing, and of course, to strengthen our national and homeland security. So that's a breadth of what we do.
And a lot of the labs have a name that's somewhat related to their location. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the Pacific Northwest, the location you guys have there in the Tri-Cities. And I know you work closely with a number of the other labs. So kind of how does that work, where labs work on different areas or similar areas together?
Yeah, so our name says where we're located. So it's just look in the map and look to the northwest, and you'll find PNNL. Our headquarters are based here in Richland, although we do have staff in Seattle, as well as on the Olympic Peninsula and Sequim and other locations. So that's where we're located, really coming out of our history, from coming out of the Hanford project from the Manhattan era, as do most of the laboratories trace back to that time. You've asked about how we work together as labs. I like to say the 17 labs are like one big, large family, which means that we collaborate together on occasions, but we have some sharp elbows sometimes at the dinner table. We work together among ourselves with universities and industry to deliver some amazing outcomes for the country, and we really band together when it comes to making sure that we're operating safely and securely and spending the taxpayer dollars effectively. So those are some of the things. A lot of times we're just responding to a particular call from DOE saying, hey, here's a new problem, and then we'll form teams and compete for it. And it's that competition of ideas that really ensures that the nation's getting the best out of each of the labs individually and collectively.
I think the balance that's super unique about the labs is between both applied and basic science that you all both bring. So what are some of the key dynamics and drivers in the RD&D, put how many Ds you want after the end of that, in the industry right now as it relates to, in particular, grid and energy topics?
Well, there's a lot going on. So you look at the drivers in different directions. One driver, of course, is the need to make sure that we're providing affordable and reliable energy to Americans, whether they're the individual consumers and homeowners, or to the factories that really provide the work for all of us. And so that need of providing affordable and reliable energy, I think, is a key driver. Now, challenges we're having is that after many years of seeing energy usage stay relatively flat, even though the economy is growing, and that was largely through energy efficiencies and better use of our existing resources, we're seeing now is just a huge increase in demand as the AI revolution takes hold. And so there's a really quite steep growth curve when you're looking at the need to provide electricity, in particular for AI, for the hyperscalers. So that's driving it. And so we're looking at this goal of meeting that supply, increasing demand, while continuing to do it affordably. Now, if I look at technological drivers behind this, certainly what's happened over the last few years and what we're trying to do to modernize the electric grid, this wonderful 100-year-old machine that has served us very well for that period of time, we're asking it to do things it was never designed to do, to incorporate a much greater variety of energy sources, to empower consumers to make decisions, to control their energy usage, to be able to control their costs. And all this has led to things like demand response, transactive energy. These are some of the technologies that we've been pioneering at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory and elsewhere in the DOE system, looking at technology that give greater power and control to consumers. It's a notion of really realizing the promise of the smart grid and marrying it to smart buildings and smart cities and bringing it all together. Those are some of the drivers we're looking at. So it's really that energy demand meeting the confluence of operational, informational technology to deliver the grid of the future.
So let's dive into some of those programs on grid modernization. I think of PNNL as maybe the leading lab, certainly among the leading labs working in advanced grid capabilities. Maybe you can talk about the work on reliability, analytics, modeling, forecasting, energy storage. I know the list is rather long there, but I'll follow up if I notice something you don't dive into. So.
Yeah, Bryce, you've really hit on a number of topics that we've been working on for several years. And the reliability and resilience really is about improving the stability of the grid. And let me just sort of walk through time as we've developed some of our capabilities. One of the first things you want to do is have situal awareness of the grid. How is it performing? Is it healthy? Do I see something coming down that might cause problems? And so toward this end, more than a decade ago, we led a regional consortium to instrument the grid with sensors that provide real-time information on the state of the grid. So now I'm not driving blind. I can actually see what's happening as I bring that information into our control room here on campus and develop those technologies. We take that data, and the second thing we do is we feed it into some very sophisticated models of the grid and a variety of tools that we've developed in partnership with utilities and the vendors that support them that allow us to observe, understand, and predict grid behavior. So one example, we've developed something called Exago, which is our short term for Exascale Grid Optimization Model. We developed with 4 other national laboratories and Stanford University. Is the only such model that can run on the world's fastest supercomputers, which also happen to be in the Department of Energy. And with this, we can simulate the grid in real time, allowing planners to analyze the potential ripple effects of different design parameters. So now we have a modeling capability. So first we had data, then we have a model. Now we want to analyze the real-time data we're collecting and feed and look at what is performing in that model. That's when we first started developing machine learning techniques. So instead of diagnosing a problem after it happened, we can now use machine learning to see some of these patterns emerging in time to present it to the operator and say, hey, you've got a problem. You should look here and take action before you have a cascading failure. And this is really our first foray into AI for the grid. And we could talk more about that if you want, but now we're getting into that whole area. Let me just jump quickly to a couple other areas you mentioned. Energy storage is key to resilience. Whether you're looking at a peak shaving capability, you're looking just to be able to back up things in case of a momentary outage, energy storage really has a role there to play. And we've been doing work in energy storage at all scales, including grid scale, for many years. And that leverages our deep expertise in chemistry and materials science. And finally, you can't really talk about grid resilience without talking about natural disasters or cyber attacks. And in both cases, we're leveraging our strong national security capabilities. For example, our ability to overlay satellite imagery with the built infrastructure to advise people during hurricanes and floodings, or to use our cybersecurity expertise to help defend the grid and provide actionable information to the utilities who might be struggling with an attack. So this is a range of things from what we're doing in data collection, analysis, modeling, energy storage. So that maybe sets the stage for further discussion, Bryce.
Yeah, we're going to talk about, I think, all of those. One quick question I had, I don't know if you have the latest on it, but the North American Resilience Model, I think it's called the NARM model. How has that work been going? Because I know a lot of resilience efforts can feel very localized, but this was an effort to kind of bring it up to a wider area and provide a resource that could be leveraged.
Yeah, so that's an ongoing effort involving several labs, and it really, I talked about one model that we've got looking at certain things, electricity usage, but the NARM is a multi-sector model. You can start looking at different aspects of the grid, different energy sources, assets, and bring that all together, and it can give you a national view across the three interconnects. But increasingly, what we're doing is recognizing that we want to take that national capability that we've been developing and bring it down to a regional level to enable planning at that regional level. And so we, for example, have been working with the state of Washington and DOE to take our modeling capabilities that we've been developing for NARM and other purposes to a regional level. And so it's ongoing. It's quite an ambitious effort, worthy of the National Laboratory System.
Let's jump into storage. So
Okay.
I know that the grid storage launch pad at PNNL is pretty new and an exciting tool. So tell us what you all have recently launched there and what you're excited to see about coming from that here in the future.
Sure. So the Grid Storage Launchpad, or GSL, because we love to speak in acronyms in DOE, we conceived this several years ago. It's been built, and in fact, just within the last year or so, we opened the facility. We're still putting it through its paces, but when it's fully operational, we're moving closer and closer to that time, it'll be the only facility of its kind in the DOE system, able of testing novel battery chemistries and materials at scale. So rather than just doing the coin batteries or the little pouch cells, we can go to prismatic batteries, but actually build things up to not quite a container-sized battery, but get something at scale up to 100 kilowatt per hour scale for testing with industry. So this is really meant to be an industrial facility to partner with people who've got novel flow battery designs or other batteries, and then test it out in a very safe environment. And so one thing that's really key here is just the safety features we've built into the facility to make sure that we can test these batteries. It's not designed to test to failure. We had a plan for failure. And so a lot of safety features went into this. We're already working with industry to get their proposals on what batteries would come in here for testing. And as expected, we're already getting oversubscribed as the line gets long of people who want access to this exciting facility. One of the cool things in this facility is our Aries autonomous lab, and it allows us to test multiple electrolyte solutions, and then based on the analysis of that, use AI to generate the next set of experiments. And so it's running 24/7, a combination of automated experimentation and artificial intelligence, of course, guided by our smart scientists and engineers.
You answered all my questions. I was going to ask about the use of AI because I'd heard that it was getting applied for advanced chemistries, and I was going to ask, are we just talking about anodes and cathodes? I know you guys were working on flow batteries, but is there different types of energy storage that is being conceived there, or is it a little bit more in the traditional realm in the way that that the energy system is thinking about those deployments?
Oh, and the Grid Storage Launchpad will look at all sorts of chemistries and materials doing that. Certainly flow batteries is one of our strengths at the laboratory, but we'll be looking at a variety of others. It's not limited to flow batteries. The AI technology is interesting because we've been looking at that, and we've been working with AI technologies in our national security programs for some time, then brought them in the form of machine learning to the grid, as I said, In this case, we're starting to ask how can we use it for the battery technologies itself. One interesting partnership that we have is with Microsoft. Now, Microsoft is interested in accelerating the rate of discovery in materials and chemistry. They came to us because of our strengths in that area, and we've been partnering. Now, one application we've been looking at is battery technologies. Now, we don't have a better battery just yet. What we've done is we've shown that we can use generative AI and high performance computing to take what was once 32 million possible chemistries and bring that down to a handful that we want to eventually look into more in greater detail. We did that from 32 million to one that we chose to synthesize in 80 hours. Amazing use of computing technology, including AI. Now, the synthesis part took us longer. That's where the autonomous labs will eventually come into place. We're still testing these battery materials to see if we get a better one, but the real purpose here is to demonstrate how much we can accelerate that discovery process and innovation. The other thing we're doing with AI that's really cool is everybody's familiar with ChatGPT, right? All right, ask a question, have this dialogue, and see what happens. We've developed something that we call Chat Grid that is available and being used by people. And it really provides a mechanism where we can take all the vast grid knowledge we have, bring it into the foundational model, and then allow a power operator to ask questions. So, for example, might ask, what if this Bellingham substation failed? How would I reroute power? Be specific in terms of where I might reroute the power and how I might bring things up. Interesting example, and that would then be a tool an operator still in control of things could use to explore the use of AI and make his or her job a bit easier.
I was going to mention that and bring it up. Can I pull the thread a little further on modeling?
Sure.
Because I know that you all have a handful of tools, and whether they have an acronym or not, I really do think of PNNL as one of those key resources where industry can go to, a certified body of smart people and ask them, we want to understand more of the what ifs because we're working in the real world. So how do you all help do that partnership well and bring some modeling solutions?
Yeah, so we have a suite of tools. Some are models, some are analysis capabilities that we've developed. And we do that in our Electricity Infrastructure Operations Center. And in that place, under non-disclosure agreements with utilities, we have real data coming in that allows us to test a variety of tools that our scientists and engineers are coming up with. And in particular, looking at machine learning techniques, for example. And so we've got contingency analysis tools to look at, MSK contingencies. We've got different things to look at the state of the grid, both dynamic and static. So a whole suite of these things that we've released. And what we do, though, is we develop in partnership with operators and the vendors that support the utilities. So rather than us doing it out in the vacuum and then just throwing something over the transom, hoping people find it useful, we have a partnership with industry. We work with these operators and we ask, what are your problems? We understand that. We know the tools they're dealing with, and we look at ways in which we can improve those tools. Then we bring the operators in and say, is this useful to you? So it's an iterative process, right? And that then leads us to developing some tools. We then license that to the vendors that support that community, because we're not very good at software support, right? We have great ideas. We can develop the prototypes, but then we want somebody else to take it forward. And so that's the kind of partnership we have. Some of the tools we've developed, for example, have been deployed and have saved over $100 million for ratepayers for one utility back east. And so these are things where these tools are important because what they can do is allow you to understand how to intervene in time to prevent a cascading failure, which would lead to an expensive blackout. It can help you analyze where to place assets in the future if you're doing long-term planning. It can help you understand how you can operate the grid more efficiently at the edge so you don't have to overbuild your assets. All these things mean lower rates for the ratepayers, lower bills. And that gets back to that affordable, reliable energy I was talking about. And those are all available to the utilities we partner with.
Can we talk a little bit about the work around cybersecurity? I know that a lot of the work in either even national security, but energy and grid and cybersecurity areas are truly a core area there. we're going to talk about stuff you're comfortable sharing here with a wider industry audience. But can you talk about what's exciting there, what you guys are working on, why you're working in that area, what some of those partnerships look like?
Sure. If you look at the grid as it's evolving, increasingly people want to be able to interact with it. All right. And so I talked earlier about demand response, or I talked about transactive energy. This requires two-way communication between your load, say buildings or a group of buildings on a campus or even a city, and the grid itself. So now you have two-way communication. You're asking us to connect, or you're asking the grid to connect more and more inverter-based technologies on the edge of the grid. These inverters technologies have software in it. You have to communicate. Once you've got software in something and you're communicating with it, you're introducing vulnerabilities. So this brings up operational security and cybersecurity. There was an article recently about some possible malware in some inverter technology. And so when we don't completely control the supply chain, the question is, how can we have assurance that we've got security of the grid? The grid is also being attacked on a daily basis, just like businesses are. And so we all have to have our firewalls and defenses up there. Well, one of the things that we can do is leverage our considerable expertise in cybersecurity from our national security programs, and then marry that up with our understanding of the energy sector. And we've done that really nicely in partnership with industry, which owns these assets. And what we bring, it's a program we have called CRISP, which is a Cyber Risk Information Sharing Program. It's voluntary. Companies can join. It represents a large fraction, about 80% of U.S. consumers and utilities participate in grid directly or indirectly. Great public-private partnership. But what we bring there is that knowledge. Utilities know how to run their business, but we have access to intelligence information and other information that we can say, hey, if something's happening, we then get information out to the utilities to help them deal with that. We're not responsible for their cyber defense, but we have additional information and know-how where we can give advice. We can then look also at, as you're looking at new technologies you want to put on the grid, we can be a trusted agent to test that technology. Really make sure we can trust it before we put it on the grid. Make sure we're not introducing hidden Trojan horses and things along those lines. And so that's a lot of what we're doing in this. And the key thing here is that partnership with industry, so we understand what their concerns are, and then work with them in time of an attack.
Costly distribution upgrades, frequent extreme weather events, demand surging from an onslaught of distributed energy resources adoption. Do these challenges sound familiar? If so, you need Virtual Peaker's cloud-based distributed energy platform. We're empowering modern utilities with next-generation virtual power plant solutions to maximize the value of DERs. The Virtual Peaker platform unifies all aspects of DER management, from DERMS to customer engagement and demand forecasting. Learn more at virtual-peaker.com.
I had another topic area I wanted to discuss, then we can go to some of the other public-private partnership areas, and it was kind of around all hazards risk mitigation. So we just bumped into some of your team at a activity we were doing related to wildfires. So that's
Okay.
a particular risk. We've bumped into you all talking about seismic risks, or you mentioned cyber, but there's all sorts of different risks that our grid is facing. How does the lab, work with industry to understand how to quantify these areas? They may seem like lower probability, certainly they're higher impact efforts, but what's the work in the wider resilient space that you guys are working in and supporting industry around?
So two classes. One would be man-made risks. Cyber's one of them, but you also have people, like a few years ago, we're taking shots at transformers in San Jose. And so we do have programs where you look at both the cyber and the physical security of our critical assets. And some of that work is supported by DOE, some of it by the Department of Homeland Security. So there's a lot of things there where we can work with utilities to do an assessment of their risks and then help them mitigate that. And CRISP is a program on the cybersecurity side that I've already described. So let me switch to the natural hazards, because they're becoming increasingly common as we deal with things. And you mentioned a couple of them, but ones that we dealt with in the past are certainly flooding due to hurricanes or storms, few years ago, Texas got hit by Hurricane Harvey, led to flooding. We reached over to our national security team, which had access to overhead imagery from satellites. We lay that over our understanding of the built utility infrastructure, and we were able to provide the only real-time information to the utilities and to the U.S. government that showed which assets were underwater at the time. That's golden information in the time of a crisis. We're also working with utilities to understand, as you get ready for a storm season, heavy snow coming, things like that, you're going to have to deploy your lines and trucks where you might want to pre-position some of those things. That's some kind of analysis that we can do in planning. And the thing we're worried about out here, of course, wildfires. And so looking at, how would we deal with wildfires? And this is where we bring AI in as well. We've developed some tools that allow people to, in real time, respond to wildfires, understand whether their assets would be threatened by a fire. And so we work with utilities to understand what are their plans, where they have a gap, where might the national lab system contribute, working in partnership with them to help develop mitigation strategies and technologies that help them get over the hump and get things back in service for their customers.
Yeah, that's good.
It's all about the reliability, affordable energy to the customers.
You've touched on this a couple times, but maybe we can revisit it a little bit. And the idea of a public-private partnership sometimes can just get a bit lost or talked about, just quickly. But I liken it to certified experts that the lab has that really don't exist anywhere else. And it sure would be a shame if that expertise doesn't find its way to industry where it can show up, in our case, on the grid, but in some other industries and really making some real world impacts. So how do you all look to strike those partnerships? What is the nature? You mentioned some licensing opportunities. What does the nature of that look like? How do we make sure that those smart researchers don't do that work in a vacuum and it can really benefit industry?
Right. The real power of the national labs and what we do exceptionally well is that fundamental, even applied research and early prototype development. That's where we shine. But we like to be motivated by real world problems, and certainly industry has them. And so a lot of times where we come together is through these partnerships and by engaging in various conferences, meetings where industry and researchers can come together, we get to hear about the challenges they're facing. And what we find in forming a public-private partnership is really to identify a shared outcome, number one. And the number two is to recognize the difference that each partner brings to that partnership. We're a research group. You're an industry. You've got utility to run. You've got electricity or energy to deliver to your customers. You're probably looking to make a profit at this. You're not so interested in the research publications we might get out. But if we focus on a shared outcome, then we can bring our relative strengths together and achieve that without getting outside our swim lanes. And together we'll go further. So that's what I find in these partnerships really is when they really work well, is when you've done that. Now, in doing that, I think one of the best partnerships we've had, I mentioned Chris, but I'll go into another one, the Grid Modernization Lab Consortium. That's something that's been around for the better part of 10 years. It was really an effort where DOE said, we've got the disparate grid efforts going across the department. They all get integrated at the labs. Can you help us get a coherent roadmap? We did that as 13 labs coming together. And then we said, all right, for the research side, where do we embrace and include academia? But we also then took this roadmap, and we had already been informed by our partnerships with industry. But we took the roadmap and went to industry and said, can you validate this roadmap? So we're not going off and wasting our time solving problems you don't care about. That kind of partnership developed over years was really key. And so other things, of course, are if they just want to license technology, if they've got a project they want to work on, they can do a funds in CRADA to contract with us to do that. They can test their new battery technologies in the GSL.
We know there's some new chairs of the Grid Modernization Lab Consortium, and we welcome them in and have really been closely following all that. I've got two questions for you here before we wrap it up. I mentioned research and development and demonstrations, all the other D's you want to put after that. the electric grid industry is not known for putting a lot of its resources into that. I've seen charts that have it certainly on much lower than a number of other maybe consumer-facing competitive industries. But nonetheless, I think investing in that, especially at this time with so many dynamics going on in the energy space, is very critical. As you mentioned, their job is to kind of get a guaranteed rate of return on reliable, affordable energy delivered. So how do the industry stakeholders lean in alongside the labs to remain competitive and bring our research and development capabilities ahead into the real world?
Well, you're right. Different industries have different models for how much they're willing to invest of their own in research, and I think the utilities have a business model that doesn't lend to large investments, but they can leverage a lot of the investments that the taxpayers are making in research and development activities at the national laboratories. And that's why I think one of the benefits for why they engage in the public-private partnerships we just talked about, they have a chance to find out what is going on at PNNL and the other laboratories. Can we tell you about our problem, and maybe you've got something that can help us? And so, they do have to at least meet us halfway to pull that technology out and apply it to their own needs. But we often do that through the intermediary of their vendors that I mentioned. And so they have a relationship. They are used to buying things from the vendors. The vendors do have a vested interest in staying ahead of the technology curve. And so that's one vector in is really through the vendor support community there. Different parts of the industry work with us. We've had wonderful collaborations with Bonneville Power Administration in the past, utilities, their vendors. So we try to find common ground. There's always the challenge is who's got the resources to pay for what. And, for the most interesting problems, we figure it out.
All right. For my last question, let's put our forecasting hat on. Maybe you're looking 3 or 5 years out. Let's call this midterm. But what do you think we've accomplished to tangibly help improve the energy system?
Well, I'd like to say in that time frame of the next 3 to 5 years, we've really delivered on the Secretary's vision of helping American companies deliver energy dominance. And what that means is that you're not going to see as many outages, that consumers are not going to see prices continually outpacing inflation. And that I'd like to say that the national labs were part of making that future a reality. And I think we can do that because these are technical problems, and there's certainly policy overlay that elected officials have to deal with. But how do we exploit cheaper energy? How do we make it available in a reliable fashion? These are technical problems that we can work on. And I like to think that in a time frame, you're going to say, wow, I've got new energy sources coming at a cost I didn't think was possible because of contributions of the national labs. I'd like to say that we're able to meet the challenge of winning the AI race, which is paramount importance for this country, as we're in a race with other countries to really get to AI throughout our society and do that in a way where that energy demand that we talked about earlier is met without costs going through the roof. That we're able to find more energy efficient computer chips to power that revolution because of the national labs' expertise in computing. That we're able to work with utilities to get some of these new AI tools deployed. So even though they're not quite ready to cede control to an AI, maybe it's being defended by an AI, and that the operators are able to make better decisions through the use of AI. I think all that is achievable in the next few years. The rate of change is remarkable, and I think we have to make sure that we can do this in an affordable way for consumers who are, after all, paying all these bills and paying for these national laboratories. So I think if we do that 3 to 5 years from now, I'd like consumers, if they think about it, to say, boy, the DOE and the national labs helped me out. Don't usually think about it, but thank you very much.
Dr. Steve Ashby, Director at PNNL, thank you all for the fantastic work there, and thanks for this rich conversation today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Bryce.
Thanks again to our season sponsor, Virtual Peaker. If you enjoy Grid Forward Forum, please follow us on your favorite podcast platform, give us a like or a review, and tell your colleagues. You can listen to all episodes and learn more about our efforts to advance the grid at gridforward.org.